Welcome to the Echo Chamber. This week, we're going to be in Noah's Echo Chamber, and I've got something to present, borrowing from one of my favourite political thinkers, and probably yours as well. And it's based on an essay I wrote on my Substack, Noah East 9, Tap In, coming from the Martinician psychiatrist France Fanon, who a lot of us will be familiar with. France Fanon, born in Martinique, the island actually across from my family, Dominica, who went on to become a psychiatrist during the Algerian Civil War and looked at the philosophy and the political underpinnings of decolonialism. And his book, The Wretched of the Earth, really, really famous book. And it's one that I think a lot of us on the left have like what I'd call a contextual understanding of. We all kind of know what he means and we kind of get it. So we kind of even wonder to ourselves, is there anything more to be garnered from reading it? And I actually sat down around this time last year, read it, ended up reading it a second time, and so much to be gleaned from reading it. So please do so. But there was a part of it which came to mind when I returned to London this summer. In the opening chapters of The Pitfalls of National Consciousness, Fanon looks to highlight those members of the native population who might undermine the independence movement once it's been gained. So what do we mean by that? So for Fanon, he looks at when the colonial rulers have been pushed out by the native population, there will be those members of the middle class who look to undermine the achievements of nationalisation, of independence, by profiteering. They will look to replicate the previous bourgeois colonial class in their own image. They will be the black faces on that system. For them, nationalisation isn't the restoration or the implementation of national industry, putting the industry at service of the population. To them, and I'll quote Fanon here, nationalisation quite simply means the transfer into the native hands of those unfair advantages which are a legacy of the colonial period. He's incredibly critical of these kind of people, this faux bourgeois, who look to embody a lot of the traits of the colonial middle class, but have none of the economic underpinning. They didn't develop anything, they didn't innovate anything, they literally are intermediaries. And what they do quite materially is they carry on cementing that colonial pipeline just within a new framework, neocolonialism. They carry on being the business owners who help export raw materials from the previously colonized country to the metropolis, rather than allowing the country to push towards self-sufficiency or nationally centered economics. That in and of itself is an incredibly powerful idea. And of course, it relates most pertinently to a decolonial environment. But what I was thinking is that when we look at class mobile people within the West, which is what we're most acquainted with, and especially like ethnic minorities, but also working class people who have achieved some level of like class mobility, maybe gone on to great universities and then got into like really high corporate jobs. I think some of these same sort of faults are present. These people, whether because of they were born into like sort of an ethnic minority background or a working class background, probably were raised with an understanding that they are pushing for some level of liberation from whatever oppression they suffer from. But along the road, they have been sort of rewarded financially, materially, by their taking part in the same system which they at one point sought to scupper. And I look at some of our peers who have left Oxford University or some other great universities and gone into the glass towers of whatever location you want to say, this side of the Atlantic or in New York. And they are following this same playbook of undermining the movement for liberation. And even though that might sound like a haughty term to use, that is what we're talking about, the movement for liberation of their class, of their people, such that if they really had that self-reflection, within this battle between the oppressed and the oppressors, they might end up facing their own family on the battlefield in what they do, in the actual material implications of what they do.
No, I think that's, first of all, very, very fascinating. Very eloquent as well, mashallah. May I say so myself?
Trying to.
Look, I think one of the big problems with this mentality is this fundamental assumptions around, is my outlook rooted in the individual or the community? And so, look, even if we just kind of bring it back to very like first principles that people can understand very easily. Listen, you're growing up in ends. It's hard, man. You're seeing your mum struggle. You're seeing people go to prison. You're seeing people do a lot of nonsense growing up.
Probably ain't even seeing your dad for some of us.
Well, for both of us. But anyways, that's another topic. And you get blessed with this privilege to go to Oxford University. And then, as we said earlier, who is knocking on your door constantly, 24/7? There's all these opportunities that are tempting you to basically come and serve their kind of institution, even though it undermines those kind of principles of community building and like grassroots organizing that you might sort of believe in. And I think...
And even more materially, it literally might be part of the system that just puts your mum's rent up.
Yeah, no, of course, right? Because you've had these experiences growing up where you can't, or maybe you haven't seen mum put the food on the table, and now you can be in a position to put food on the table. But then I think I'm just interested in understanding, like, from the individual's perspective, how do you battle that self-interest?
I think it takes discipline, man. And honestly, obviously we both know that it's incredibly hard. Like, it is so alluring, material desires of this system. But I think the thing to think about is, if you're one of these people out there who recognizes that the system within which you were born is racist, is classist, is exploitative, is sexist, yet the majority of your day is spent being successful within that system, you're going to have to be quite honest with yourself that you are culpable for promoting all of those things. And we talk a lot about structural injustice, me and yourself, and it'll become a theme of this topic. That's how you become aware of the structural injustice you're a part of. You are trying to be the king of this structure, therefore you're really promoting it.
And I think that change, though, like real change, it doesn't happen top down, but it happens bottom up from everyone's micro decisions to do just a bit of good in the world. And so I would encourage people to just really sit and think about, what is it that I can do to kind of unroot some injustice in my capacity, right? So perhaps if you are a big corporate lawyer, well, maybe you give some pro bono work to a charity. If you're like us and you talk or trying to make a career of talking, then talk about the issues that matter.
And I mean, also, the discipline as well is like, do I need this much money?
Yeah.
Do I actually need more and more? And I think we talk all the time about when money's on the table, there's an allure to try and lie to yourself that, oh, I'll do this for 10 years and then I'll come out and I'll make the change I want. But we say a lot, the practice is the person. You know, you see sometimes Muslim scholars a lot will talk about, sometimes people don't feel worthy to pray when their iman, when their faith is low. But that's the point that you need to find yourself on the mat in sujood, because it is the practice of praying that will increase your iman.
But who is the Muslim here? Me or Noah? Gosh, mashallah.
I'm just a Tao Hamlet's man.
No.
In that same sense, though, the practice of doing these, engaging in this exploitative behavior, being part of a structure which is counterproductive to your original goals, will end up you coming out the other side a different person.
But even I think it's about this accountability matrix, right? So I know that every act that I do, because I'm a practicing Muslim, will one day be accountable to God. And so it's very difficult for me to actually, gosh, there's so much crime down here.
I know.
I wish people would actually feel like they're accountable to God, because maybe then we wouldn't hear so many sirens.
I mean, speak about the Panorama documentary. Who knows where they're going right now, those police.
But I think like having a spiritual background as well and a spiritual outlook, which is something that's very lost in this world, doesn't necessarily lead to this conclusion, but it can be sufficient for it, is to be able to actually get you to those conclusions that allow you to stay true and stay firm on those principles that you might be raised with.
And it's also just like reinforcing the idea that I'm glad I was raised with, that money is not the only metric.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a very religious thing that people that were raised religiously will understand this, but money really isn't the only metric. And a lot of times, you know, the society we live in might judge you a lot by money because we're living in an age of like I say, financial totalitarianism. But for your own self, don't only value yourself by the money you earn, which will allow you to pursue other more ideological goals. I think we'll leave it there for the echo chamber. And I hope I've been able to get those ideas out a bit more. As I say, we'll be putting out a couple essays on North Star, so head to the North Star Politics Substack. Also head to my personal Substack, Noah East 9. There's loads of stuff on there.
I write too, by the way. Shout
out. Oh, yours as well. Yeah, Sean got into writing as well.
Sean Ramey's
Substack.
Everything, but everything's going to be in the link anyways.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a lot more thought out than the words. These are just off the dome. The words you write are a lot more thought out, so we hope you'll enjoy.